Hello and a very good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Let's begin, as always, with the latest headlines this morning. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Colombo on a historic visit. Slew of agreements addressed to Sri Lankan Parliament will be part of his engagements. Rajya Sabha passes the insurance bill that raises ceiling for foreign investment in the sector. CBI detains 3 people, including a chartered accountant and 2 Union Finance Ministry officials in the corporate espionage case. And Iraqi forces make significant advances into Tikrit. Officials say that they have forced out Islamic State terrorists from 75% of the city. Top focus on the bulletin this morning. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Colombo in the early hours for a historic visit, during which he is expected to hold talks with the country's top leadership. Modi reached the capital for a 2-day visit in a special Air India plane. He will hold summit talks with Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Colombo early morning on Friday for what is the 4th interaction between the two nations since his coming to power in May last year. Modi was met at the airport by a host of dignitaries led by the Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Modi will hold talks with newly elected President Maithripala Sirisena and the Prime Minister, all leading up to a slew of agreements to be signed by both nations. The Tamil population also has high expectations from the visit.
The issue of fishermen is a humanitarian issue. It's an issue which must be resolved through dialogue and amicably. It's not an issue that can be resolved by shooting at one another.
Modi is expected to address the Sri Lankan Parliament and attend a business meet by the Ceylon Chambers of Commerce. He is also slated to commission a railway project in Thalaimanar.
Now this project, which is being inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, that is from Thalaimanar Pier to Madhu Road. It will cover a distance of 60 kilometers. This project is very important to the public of northern province of Sri Lanka, as it will provide connectivity for them to come to Colombo and south and vice versa.
Our country is going towards a good economical situation, and it's improving, and we need good support from our neighbor countries, and we hope India is the closest nation, and that it will support us further.
Other items on the agenda during Modi's visit are a push for final approval of a 500 megawatt power plant to be built by the NTPC, tightening defence and security cooperation. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Joining me for a chat this morning to talk about Prime Minister's Sri Lanka leg of his 3-nation tour, I have with me Professor P. Sahadevan of the JNU. He is part of the South Asian Studies school there. Professor, good morning.
Good morning.
A historic visit in many ways, just for one reason, of course, is the fact that, India is Sri Lanka's closest neighbor, and it's been over 2.5 decades since a Prime Minister visited that particular country. That itself is historic, isn't it?
It's a very significant visit in a way. I think, as you rightly said, it's taking place after 2.5 decades. So much so, I think that's, we are so close, but we are also quite distant in the past. I think in the past, India had a very uneasy relationship, more so when Mahinda Rajapaksa was in power. He was tilting his policy towards China, making India quite uncomfortable and also sometimes very uneasy. But I think that seems to be a thing of the past. I think both governments are really determined to really take the relationship to a next level. And it's quite a bit of a deepening of economic engagement, and all kinds of things are really be on the agenda, making both countries much more closer than what it were in the past.
So, indeed. A relatively new government in India, a very new government in Sri Lanka. The times ahead look promising, but do you expect there to be some kind of roadblocks?
I think there are plenty of roadblocks, especially in Sri Lanka. When you look at India-Sri Lanka relations, you must really understand, I think in democracies you have constituencies which are liberal, radical and so on. Therefore, I think it's number of issues. You may really have a nationalistic forces in Sri Lanka really maybe really expressing their reservation on a number of issues. India, besides its own economic engagement, it has got also really sort of plenty of other issues to be addressed, which may be to the discomfort of Sri Lanka at some points in time, especially the political solution to the ethnic conflict. The TN, Tamil National Alliance, which is a predominant alliance representing the Sri Lankan Tamils, are expecting a huge push from India to make the Sri Sena government to really address the core issue of political solution. But India is not in a position to push at the moment, because you need to really stabilize the government in Colombo, which is just 2 months old, and also they are expecting a parliamentary election in in the summer. So at this moment, if you really push things beyond a particular level, I think that you may really have difficulties. But at the same time, the expectations are very, very huge and very high in a way.
Yes, expectations are really high, and very recently, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe raked up the entire fishermen issue. That seemed to have been quietened down for a little while after the new government came into place in Sri Lanka. But do you see that issue being taken up again, or do you think that matter is closed after the foreign minister took it up with Sri Lanka?
No, I don't think so, because though I consider fishermen issue is not a very core issue in international India-Sri Lanka relations, but it is an irritant and is an issue that requires an urgent attention, precisely because you have Tamil Nadu fishermen crossing over to the Sri Lankan waters, and they have a very much very difficulties in terms of causing difficulties to the northern fishermen and all that. I think the problem is, I think that's, we need to address those issues. I think both India and Sri Lanka are really seeking to address the issue by sort of involving the fishermen from both countries to sit down and talk about a way out. But I think the point is, I think Ranil Wickremesinghe's talk, the outburst, which I would call as the outburst, is in a way actually sort of unintended to really sort of carry a very significant message. But I think he also did it under pressure from the constituencies which are really criticizing the government for not taking steps to prevent the Indian fishermen crossing over to the Sri Lankan waters. But I don't think that he meant really sort of shooting virtually down anyone who are crossing over, but I think it's also a reflection of the frustration perhaps the Sri Lankan government really faced with when it comes to dealing with the Tamil Nadu fishermen. I think there's plenty of opportunities when both countries really sort of expand and deepen their relationship. These kinds of irritants can be really handled very smoothly, and the very fact that both governments are really determined to really sort of have a talks going on involving even the fishermen is a step forward in a way.
Both countries have a free trade agreement. It's been in existence for over 15 years now. Do you see the trade ties being boosted further? Do you see any steps in that regard this time? I
think if FTA, the free trade agreement, benefited both countries in a very significant manner, but I think the next step which India expects at least to really take the FTA to a next level, that is a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. I think the proposals, the package was really sort of decided way back in 2008. It is in cold storage. And because Rajapaksa government was not very keen to really pursue that agenda, now I believe there is a talk of really sort of reviving that whole CEPA agreement. And I'm sure, I think that when they really get on to talking about the deepening economic engagement, CEPA would actually really prominently comes as a major economic agenda between the two countries. I think it's going to be a whole lot of, Indian services going there. But of course, there is this huge concern. When Indian services really go there, I think the Sri Lankans really feel that I think it's going to be all over India, going to really swamp their sectors. But I think some of the, concerns needs to be really addressed, even when one really takes up the CEPA as a next step towards cementing economic engagement. Of course, Sri Lanka is a very small country. You need to really factor that in mind. You have a very huge service sector which shouldn't be really seen as a threat to their existence in a way.
Indeed.
I think it's, one has to be practical. One has to be also very pragmatic in terms of dealing with a neighbor who otherwise very asymmetric in power relations.
Sure. Prime Minister Modi is also scheduled to visit Jaffna. Do you expect that leg of his visit to be smooth, or do you expect some kind of protests or something else happening there in Jaffna?
I don't think so. I think it's people who would really welcome him in a way. I think because it's all also really demonstrating one's own support to those who really suffered in the war. I think the first time a Prime Minister from India is really going to the north where you had bloodshed, for the last 26 years. I think people who really suffered in the war look forward to India as a kind of, source of sympathy and, transformation that would really bring about in their life. So therefore, I think Mr. Modi will be really welcomed so much there, and then also really very symbolic gestures in terms of really demonstrating and showing that I think India is with those people who really suffered in the war. I think it's a whole lot of reconstruction is required, the whole lot of rehabilitation is required. If the Prime Minister announces certain measures, would really be very welcomed and appreciated so much in those war-torn areas.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us and putting things into perspective for us. But before we move on to another story, let's quickly go across to Colombo, where our correspondent Akhilesh Suman is joining us on the phone line. Akhilesh, give us a sense of, what the agenda really looks like as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned. What's he scheduled to do over the next 2 days? Akhilesh, if you can hear me, what is the schedule? What does the schedule of Prime Minister Modi look like over the next 2 days?
This way. Yeah, no, other side.
Well, we seem to have some technical difficulties there with the phone line, but we'll have to leave it at that and move on to some more news that we are tracking here on Rajya Sabha TV. Moving on now, CBI detains 3 people, including a chartered accountant and 2 Union Finance Ministry officials in corporate espionage case.
Thanks to the untiring efforts and persistence of researchers,
as science beckons India into the future, Rajya Sabha television partakes the responsibility, bringing technology to the Indian people.
The progress of any nation is parallel to the progress of science and technology.
Monitoring scientific advances as they unravel. Interviewing the country's greatest minds. Project the power of science to benefit and transform India. Watch Science Monitor every Saturday at 11:30 AM and Sunday at 12:30 PM only on Rajya Sabha TV. Tradition dating back centuries. A cultural heritage that inspires and warms at once. Magic that awes. Rajya Sabha television brings you events that embrace the wonders of India's classical arts. Conversations with the biggest names in the culture and music. Rajya Sabha television, democracy at work.
Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira.
Barack Obama has been elected on the basis that I will no longer take America into wars, and in fact quite the opposite, I will pull America out of wars.
According to the Indian government, fishermen are not at fault.
The US intervention in Iraq set the stage for exacerbation of these conflicts, and then the intervention in Syria.
Watch World Panorama at these times on Rajya Sabha television.
He makes me sick, he's so mean, he's so selfish, it seems that he screams and he gets what he wants done. So I won't let go, I won't let go.
आवाज और उनके अंदाज ने दिलाया हॉलीवुड में एक अहम मकाम।
So the devil is loose, go and get him.
लेकिन दिल आज भी है खालिस हिंदुस्तानी।
My psyche may be American, and my career is international. मगर मेरा soul और roots will always be Indian.
मिलिए शख्सियत में आशा पुतली से शनिवार रात 10:30 बजे और रविवार सुबह 11 बजे सिर्फ राज्यसभा टीवी पर।
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, the Rajya Sabha has passed the landmark Insurance Laws Amendment Bill 2015, allowing for raising the foreign direct investment cap in the insurance sector. The bill replaces an ordinance issued by the government earlier, making this the government's first big financial reform.
After nearly 6 years of languishing in Parliament, the Insurance Laws Amendment Bill 2015 is finally through both houses. It replaces an ordinance promulgated by the government in December last year. But not before heated debate and repeated adjournments over technicalities, as a similar legislation was pending in the House. Deputy Chairman P.J. Kurian ruled that the new bill as passed by the Lok Sabha could be taken up as it was a unique and unprecedented situation.
That two substantial bills, identical bill, here one our property, the other transmitter from the other house. That is certainly unusual and unprecedented. But there is no constitutional provision or rule which prohibits the listing of a bill passed by the Lok Sabha in the Rajya Sabha, even if it is substantially identical to a bill. The Insurance Laws Amendment Bill 2015, as passed by Lok Sabha, has accordingly been listed in the agenda of today. House may exercise the procedural option open to it.
Once the bill was introduced by MOS Finance Jayant Sinha, Trinamool Congress and left parties strongly opposed it.
In the last 5 years, what has happened? Penetration has in fact dropped. Last 5 years it has dropped by 1%. Now their target is 3% in the next 5 years. Don't say we didn't warn you. This will never happen.
Why India should amend its legislation in order to allow 49% FDI, which will be detrimental to our economy, it will be detrimental to our insurance sector.
But a critical factor towards getting the bill through was support from the Congress and NCP, who had brought the bill in 2008.
LIC is a sterling example of good governance, of good practices. But is one LIC enough? I am sure that LIC is doing a great job, but one LIC or one general insurance corporation is not going to be enough to serve the needs of such a large country.
Smaller parties like SP, BSP and JDU raised concerns and walked out during the discussion in the House on the bill. The government meanwhile sought to allay concerns of members, saying the bill has enough regulations to prevent any misuse.
And the regulations are there, honourable members, with Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir. The regulations are there so that we can assure you that the investments that are coming from the insurance companies, 15% of them have to go into infrastructure. So as this industry grows, this money is going to go into the infrastructure.
The insurance bill cleared by the Lok Sabha on March 4th provides for raising the foreign investment cap in the insurance sector from 26% to 49%. Expect a thumbs up from the markets too. Vishal Dahiya's report for Rajya Sabha television.
Meanwhile, the Masrat Alam issue came up in the Rajya Sabha on Thursday. The Home Minister said that the centre has directed the Jammu and Kashmir government to challenge the bail to the separatist leader, and an advisory has been issued to the Mufti government to keep close surveillance on Alam and his associates.
Home Minister Rajnath Singh informed the upper house that his ministry was unsatisfied with the Jammu and Kashmir government's report on the release of Masrat Alam. The centre has sought more clarification from the PDP-led government. The centre has issued advisory to the state government on Alam to pursue all 27 cases against the separatist leader vigorously. The advisory follows days of political sparring over the release. Rajnath said that the Jammu and Kashmir government will keep a hawk eye vigil on the hardliners with the help of central security agencies.
The Home Ministry has issued an advisory to the government of Jammu and Kashmir on the following lines.
Home Minister also clarified that fresh detention orders for Alam were not issued because there were no new grounds for detaining him as mandated by a Supreme Court ruling.
The Honorable Supreme Court of India had also in March 2013 observed that if any fresh detention order is issued by the government of Jammu and Kashmir with respect to Masrat Alam Bhatt, the same shall not come into force for a period of 1 week from the date of communication of the order to enable him to pursue appropriate legal remedy.
The BJP faced flack from the opposition parties over the issue. The opposition also leveled charge against the government that the decision was taken in February when the state was under the central rule. Both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Rajnath Singh made statements in Parliament condemning his release. Kriti Mishra, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, retail inflation rose further in February to 5.3%, registering a third straight month since it's been climbing. But there's some encouraging news too. The index for industrial output grew at 2.6% in January, improving on December's figures. Here are the details.
Retail inflation in the month of February this year rose to 5.37% compared to 5.11% in the month of January. Not good news, but far lower than the 7.88% in the corresponding month in 2014. The combined inflation rate for food and beverages stood at 6.76% for February, while combined inflation rate for fuel and light stood at 4.72% for February. However, there is some good news on the factory output front. Industrial output picked up with growth rising to 2.6% in January from December's 1.7%. Industrial production in January was boosted by a 3.3% rise in manufacturing and 2.7% increase in electricity output. But output in the mining sector contracted 2.8%. A plunge in global oil prices and weak consumption has driven down inflation to around 5% from double digits in 2013, giving room to the RBI to cut interest rates twice so far this year to spur growth. And it remains below the RBI's inflation target of 6% for January 2016. Kriti Mishra's report for Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, the Central Bureau of Investigation detained 3 people, including a chartered accountant in Mumbai and 2 Union Finance Ministry officials in the corporate espionage case. Raids were conducted at 6 places in Delhi and a couple of locations in Mumbai. The case relates to some corporates getting access to sensitive documents in collusion with government officials from various ministries. Besides a Mumbai-based chartered accountant, the 2 officials in Delhi are from the Department of Economic Affairs and the Department of Disinvestment and Grievances. The CBI said that the detained people sold policy and investment documents to corporates. Well, let's now bring you up to date with all the other news and updates from across the country in our segment Nationwide. BJP President Amit Shah announced names for the 178-member party National Executive Union Ministers Smriti Irani and Nejma Heptullah and MP Hema Malini were dropped, while 2 cabinet ministers Birendra Singh and Suresh Prabhu, who joined the party recently, were inducted into the team. 111 members, including most of the union ministers and prominent party leaders, have found a place in the team. A pregnant woman died of swine flu, taking the toll to 11 in Delhi. The 18-year-old victim is the second pregnant woman to have perished due to H1N1 virus in the city, with the other death reported last month. A regional television channel in Tamil Nadu, Pudiya Thalaimurai, was attacked by unknown people on Thursday. Police officials said 2 crude bombs were thrown into the office. No one was injured. Well, let's take a look now at the news and events lined up for today in our segment The Day Ahead. The RSS top brass will start its 3-day meet in Nagpur today to deliberate over national issues and also elect a new General Secretary. RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat will inaugurate the meeting of the Akhil Bharatiya Pratinidhi Sabha, the highest body for policy formulation and decision-making of the organization. RSS General Secretary Suresh Bhaiyaji Joshi could be seen standing for re-election to the post. Congress is expected to continue its protest against the land acquisition bill. Former Rural Development Minister Jairam Ramesh will lead a march from Batta and Parsol in western Uttar Pradesh. Indian Youth Congress activists will be joined by the farmers of the region. They are opposing changes proposed by the centre, accusing it of being anti-farmer. Delhi lawyers will observe a strike to protest the killing of an advocate inside a court premises in Allahabad. Work will remain suspended in all district courts on Friday. Lawyers allege there was no security inside the premises for judges, advocates and litigants after a policeman allegedly shot advocate Nabi Ahmed on Wednesday. They are demanding strict action against the offender even as the policeman remains untraceable. Securities Appellate Tribunal will announce its order on DLF's plea against a SEBI ruling barring the realtor from markets. SEBI had passed an order in October last year after finding DLF and its 6 top executives guilty of active and deliberate suppression of material information at the time of its IPO in 2007, thus misleading the investors. DLF has been barred from markets for 3 years. Moving on to some international news now. Iraqi forces have made significant advances into Tikrit on several fronts. Officials say that they managed to force back Islamic State militants and gained control of about 75% of the city. Soldiers and militiamen took areas and hill sites in the north, south and west, including a police headquarters and a hospital. Iraq's defense minister announced that the second phase of the offensive will start soon. It is the biggest offensive against the Islamic State terrorists since the group captured large parts of the country last June. Well, tension prevailed in the town of Ferguson after 2 officers were shot during protests. The state and county police have taken over the protest security in the St. Louis suburb where the incident took place early on Thursday. A manhunt was also launched for those responsible for the shooting of the officers. Police have taken 2 men and 1 woman into custody for questioning, but no arrests were made. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder condemned the shooting. He said the heinous assault could undermine police reforms. The 2 officers were seriously injured during a demonstration after the city's police chief Tom Jackson resigned.
What happened last night was a pure ambush. This was not someone trying to bring healing to Ferguson. This was a damn punk, a punk who was trying to sow discord in an area that is trying to get its act together and trying to bring together a community that has been fractured for too long. This really disgusting and cowardly attack might have been intended to unravel any sense of progress that exists, but I hope that that does not in fact happen.
Well, let's now get you more international news and updates in our World Wrap. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his supporters staged an anti-imperialist rally in Caracas to protest against US sanctions. The rally was in response to US statements that the sanctions were intended to change and not topple the government. Maduro's socialist government has accused Washington of planning military attacks and wider Cuba-style trade sanctions. The Islamic State has accepted a pledge of allegiance of Nigeria's militant group Boko Haram. In an audio tape, a spokesman of the terrorist group urged Muslims to join militants in West Africa. This was in response to Boko Haram posting a message saying it wanted to join Islamic State. The wreckage of an Army Black Hawk helicopter that crashed during a nighttime training mission has been found. None of the 11 service members on board were believed to have survived. Officials say that the cause of the crash has not been determined. Well, that's it on this edition of the Breakfast News. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day.